In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 tips that you can use to live a surprisingly enjoyable and comfortable life while living on a tight budget and save money in the process during these tough economic times. You are watching the Financial Metaverse. Inflation is beginning to take its toll on families and individuals as prices of basic necessities are beginning to soar. Although the US Federal Reserve decided to keep interest rates unchanged after the January meeting, the outlook still remains hawkish, which means that their main priority is to control inflation, which means that they are most likely to increase interest rates after their March meeting in order to control inflation. South Africans weren't so lucky, however, as the South African Reserve Bank decided to increase interest rates by 25 basis points after the January meeting, which effectively increases the cost of debt repayments. We know, of course, that these costs will be passed on to the consumer, as suppliers of goods and services will simply have to increase their prices in order to remain sustainable. If you are living on a tight budget or concerned that your budget is getting tighter, the combined impact of applying these 10 tips will have a profound impact in helping you live a comfortable and enjoyable life and be able to save money in the process. Tip number 1, be honest about wants versus needs. One of the most difficult parts of budgeting is understanding the difference between needs and wants. For instance, we all need food, water, shelter, and clothing in order to survive. Just because food is a necessity doesn't mean we need to go dine at a fancy restaurant every evening for dinner. And just because shelter is a necessity doesn't mean you should go drown yourself in home loan repayments to buy a house that you actually can't afford. So here's a tip. Necessities don't need an explanation. For instance, if you needed a car to commute to work every day and you had saved up 50,000 Rand in order to buy the car, no one would question your decision. However, if you decided to go to your favorite car dealership and then took out a loan for 500,000 Rand in order to buy a car for the very same reason, then you'd probably have some explaining to do. Tip number 2, save before you spend. If you are living on a tight budget, the last thing that should hit the chopping block is your savings. In fact, it should become your number one priority. So what do I mean? Well, whenever you receive your paycheck, you should put 10 to 20% into an interest-bearing savings account before you spend a single cent. This might seem a little backwards, but it's actually the first step in taking control of your finances. After all, the lack of saving is probably one of the main reasons why you are living in a tight budget to begin with. So decide how much you want to save and then get the rest of your money to behave. If you're really struggling with this, I would recommend that you get together with like-minded people and form some sort of a savings club like I have done. This will greatly increase the chances of you following through on your commitment to save, because you'll not only be accountable to yourself but also to other people who share your aspirations and ambitions to save. Tip number 3, work together with your spouse and children. If you are married and living on a tight budget, you'll only succeed if you and your spouse work together. Having one person handle all the finances is an unhealthy dynamic that will lead to financial struggle. Let's put it this way. How many games would a soccer team win if only half the players show up for practice every day? Probably 0, right? So what does working together mean and actually look like when managing finances? You should be able to dream together. Dreaming together is one of the best parts of marriage. It is fun, therapeutic, and energizing to be able to share your dreams and aspirations with your spouse and plan together how you're going to go about achieving those dreams. Which leads me to the next part, which is to set goals together. In the immortal words of Shia LaBeouf, don't let your dreams be dreams. If you have dreams that you want to accomplish with your finances, turn them into goals and then work together to decide how you're going to go about it in order to make sure that you achieve those dreams. The next step is to speak honestly. One of the hardest parts of marital life is the ability to speak honestly about finances with each other. If you think something isn't working or that your spouse is getting off track with their spending habits, you should be able to communicate this openly, frankly, but lovingly. A calm and proactive conversation about finances is much better than a reactive argument. It is very helpful when you have a consistent time when you meet with your spouse in order to discuss your financial affairs. The last step in this tip is to pray together often as a couple. One of the most powerful ways to solidify and strengthen a marriage is to put God at the center of your marriage. If you put God at the center of everything you do, particularly your finances, you can achieve even the impossible. Remember, your marital finances are a journey and not a destination. And a journey is much more exciting when 2 or more people are involved. So work together with your spouse to create a financial future that both of you can be proud of. Tip number 4, turn up the romance. This is less of a budgeting tip and more of a marriage tip, and has been a great reminder for me as well as a married man, regardless of the status of one's budget. But if you're in a tight budget, you need to make time for your marriage, because if you aren't careful, frugality can begin to interfere with your romance. And what would be the point of putting all that effort to budget and manage your finances if you are growing apart from your spouse? There is never a more important time on putting an emphasis on romance than when you are living on a tight budget. So if you need to pay a little less into your savings or pay a little less into your debt repayments so that you can go out more often as a couple, you need to do it. Your marriage is more important than any of that. So take time to treat your spouse to a fancy date once in a while. Go on a weekend getaway. Treat each other to a nice, relaxing professional massage like I like to do. You don't need to spend like crazy to keep the fires of romance burning in your marriage. You just need to be intentional about it. Tip number 5, cut down on utilities. This may be one of the most common money-saving tips out there, but cutting down on your utilities can save you loads of cash. Water heating accounts for 30 to 40% of your electricity or power bill. So cutting down on your water heating will probably have the most significant impact in reducing your overall utility bill. I know this personally because since we've decided to use less hot water when we bathe or shower, our electricity costs have gone down significantly. Also make sure that you sort out any leaks that are in your house, as this could significantly reduce your water usage. And try using water-saving devices on your showers and on your flushing toilets. Just implementing this tip could save you anywhere from 250 to 1,000 Rand a month, depending on the size of your household, of course. Tip number 6, cut paid subscription television or cable. If you are on a tight budget, cutting paid subscription TV should be one of the first things that you cut out of your budget. I don't know what the stats are in South Africa, but did you know that the average American watches 7 hours of paid subscription TV every day? Can you imagine the things that you can do with an extra 7 hours every day instead of watching TV? You could start a business, learn a new hobby, start a blog or a YouTube channel. Hint, hint. And that's what I did. And it's much more rewarding, I can tell you, than sitting and watching TV all day. Tight finances and paid subscription TV don't mix. So go ahead and cut it from your budget. Tip number 7, read a lot. If you want to be successful in any area of your life, reading is one of the best things that you can do. As I often say to my kids, readers are leaders and leaders are readers. But unlike television and video games, reading stimulates the mind. It lengthens your attention span, expands your knowledge, builds your critical thinking skills, and heightens your ability to focus. And all of this leads to success when you are living on a tight budget. Tip number 8, get your DIY on. Let's face it, sometimes you need to update your home or do a few minor repairs around the house, but the costs can be quite prohibitive when you are living on a tight budget. So whether you are in need of doing some home renovations or landscaping your garden, you can learn to do these things yourself and avoid paying chunks of cash. For example, I needed to repair a leaking tap in my home, so I decided to do a YouTube search to see how I could do it. And lo and behold, it was quite simple. What could have ended up costing me 500 Rand plus in cost of a call-out fee for a plumber, the labor of the plumber and the material, I ended up spending less than 50 Rand repairing it myself. Tip number 9, find ways to make extra money. When you are living on a tight budget, there comes a point where you just need to make extra money. All you have to do is to get creative. Do you have a marketable skill that people are prepared to pay money for? Do you have a passion or a hobby that you could turn into an income-generating source? There is no shame in taking on extra jobs or side gigs in order to make ends meet. In fact, it's one of the most honorable things that you can do. So go out there, get creative and find ways within your abilities and strength to generate extra money. If you have any ideas or tips that could help anybody in this community making extra money, please share them in the comment section below. Tip number 10, have fun. You know what will cause you to fail in your budgeting? Boredom. And if you aren't careful, living on a tight budget can become very boring. So you need to be sure to have some fun once in a while. That's why I recommend you dedicate 5% of your budget to just having fun. This might not be a big amount relative to your income, of course, but you'll be amazed at how far you can stretch that money. You may also be surprised at the number of cheap or free fun activities that you can do around your city or town these days. You just have to be creative and intentional about looking for new opportunities or ask for recommendations from friends or family members around your neighborhood. Life on a budget doesn't have to be boring. It just requires creativity and a bit of collaboration. I really hope that these tips will help you on your journey to live a joyful and abundant life. And if you'd like to receive more content like this from me, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And also, I'd love to hear how these tips work for you and any other tips or insights that you have to share with the Financial Metaverse community that could benefit others. Please post this in the comment section below. And look out for my next video where I share 5 traps that you need to be aware of if you are in your 40s or approaching your 40s.